Hey, this is Caleb. Thanks for joining us here on Millennial Z, and we're going to tackle the third installment of our Legendary Item series. And this part is going to cover Imbuement. If you're looking for a more specific topic, check out the description for timestamps so that you know where to navigate to hone in on exactly the information that you're looking for. The Imbuement system was developed as a way to keep our items a bit more distinct and special. Gandalf, after all, he didn't trash Glamdring every couple of chapters, so why would we throw out our finely tuned weapons of the first age every 10 levels? So instead of trashing and starting over and doing that every so often, when the level cap is increased for everyone, our allies are able to continue to level with us. Which brings us to our first step, which is preparing for Imbuement. The Imbuement process can start at level 100, and you need a legendary item that is level 100. During this phase, the most important thing you're going to do is farm your legacies and fine-tune your item with exactly the legacies you want. It is possible to change the legacies after Imbuement, but it tends to be far more costly. You can use a Crystal of Remembrance to add a new legacy slot to your item, either before or after Imbuement, and the difference here being that if you use it before Imbuement, you can only use it once. If you use it after Imbuement, you can use it as many times as you want, but there can only be 7 legacy slots. So really, you should only be using it once anyway, given that you've properly leveled up your item prior to Imbuement. There is the option of purchasing Imbued Legacy Replacement Scrolls, but as I mentioned before, it's cheaper to get the item ironed out before Imbuement. Now, most of these things also can be done with Mithril coins, but it's not cheap. It's a pretty steep price for those. So, again, it's all built into the game, and you can certainly do it just by doing what you normally do naturally. Once you get the legacies you want and are happy with your item, go ahead and imbue it. You're going to do this by visiting any Forge Master and selecting the Imbuement tab. It's worth noting that at this point, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st stage items are all going to end up being exactly the same after they're capped out, whereas before you had a significant difference in DPS and so on. Now the difference is that the better quality items, your 1st stage items, will require less of the Anphilis Scrolls of Empowerment in the maxing out process. Since 1st stage items aren't overly difficult to get your hands on, it's typically worth grinding out for them. One of the easiest ways to get a symbol for your 1st stage item is to run the Throne of Dread Terror and just run up to the first boss. That's on tier 1. You can run that with 6 people that are level 130. A lot of times they'll tag along a low level if you're asking around for that, and you typically will get enough of the coins to trade in at Minas Tirith for the symbol that you need. There are other alternatives, though. It's not overly difficult. Which brings us to the leveling process of your imbued item. Every legacy will gain XP rather than the item itself. Okay, so before you were applying points, after you gained levels, now each legacy will level up on its own. When the legacy hits its cap, you're going to need to use an Anphilis Scroll of Empowerment to unlock the next tier. That's where those scrolls come in. You no longer need to reforge or spend points depending, working in deciding which legacies you want to increase. And at the current time of this video, where the player cap is 130, every legacy has a cap of 83 tiers. Now, the only exception to this is the DPS legacy. The DPS legacy caps at 71 and uses Anphilis Starlit Crystals to increase its tiers. And now you have the maximum tiers bar that tracks your overall progress in place of the LI XP bar, because your item isn't earning XP, the actual individual legacies are. This levels up as you add tiers to the individual legacies and doesn't really mean anything additional to the item other than the overall tracking of your progress. Scrolls of Delving can also still be used to increase the tiers of all legacies, but they can only be used a single time either before or after Imbuement. Alright, so really it isn't incredibly complicated. I think the Imbuement process, and once you get your item imbued, the legacy or the legendary item system just gets so much simpler. But there are just a few things you want to know before you do the imbuement. Number one, again, just to recap, number one being to get your legacy squared away before you imbue. And number two being stock up on those Anphilis Scrolls of Empowerment. You're going to need them. I hope I was able to keep it simple for everyone and answer the questions that you might have. If I missed anything, call it out in the comments below. Thanks again for your time and support. Happy hunting.